I want to put a disclaimer out there. I almost decided not to do this case. I'm a huge animal person, and this was really hard for me to sit through reading and then having to reread it and write it, if that makes sense. So I almost talked myself out of doing this case, but I already did so much research. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna have to push through it. What's up, guys? It's Lauren. Welcome back to my channel. In this video, I am going to be telling you guys the case of the Sacramento vampire. So before we get started, I just want to put a huge trigger warning out there because this case is, first of all, super long. It goes into quite a bit of gruesome details. Now, I know quite a few cases do, just to kind of get the point across on the crime, but this one is like next level. So if you guys get squeamish and don't like gruesome details about certain things, you might not want to watch this video, but I'm going to put a trigger warning for sexual assault / harassment, animal cruelty / abuse, obviously murder, and then mental illness as well. And then towards the end, it also talks about suicide. So I just want to put a huge, like a flashing warning sign right now. Click off of this if you do not want to hear about it because it gets really intense, and it's also a really long case. It took me a day and a half to do research, and normally I can get it done in one day. So with that being said, without further ado, let's get into the case of the Vampire of Sacramento. So Richard Trenton Chase had a thing for blood, and he also had a fear of disintegrating. He was born May 23rd, 1950, and he had a thing for setting fires and tormenting animals. He had a sister who was 4 years younger, and his father was a huge disciplinarian who loved bickering with his wife. And by the age of 10, Richard was killing cats. As a teenager, Richard drank and smoked, and he was constantly getting into trouble, but he showed no shame doing it. He also dated several girls, and one girl in particular said that he had a hard time performing sexually. He was unable to keep an erection, so when he was 18 years old, he went to see a psychiatrist. He found out the root of the cause was repressed anger. The psychiatrist also thought he might be suffering from a major mental illness, but decided he didn't need to be committed. Once he moved out of his parents' house, he went through many roommates, and a lot of them reported bizarre behavior and drug use. And even the few friends he had said he was weird. One time, he nailed his closet door shut and claimed that people were invading his space in there. In 1971, he was arrested for marijuana possession. Another time, he went to the ER looking for the person who stole his pulmonary artery. He also complained that bones were coming out the back of his head, his stomach was backwards, and his heart often stopped beating. Another psychiatrist diagnosed him as a paranoid schizophrenic, but thought he might actually be suffering from a drug-induced toxic psychosis. He was put under observation for 72 hours, and after that, he could leave whenever he wanted to. It was recommended that he stayed, but he didn't have to, and he was eventually released. His life became more and more messy and careless as he fell into hypochondria and even more heavy drug abuse. He was 5'11" and only 145 pounds, and he lived with his mom for a while, who was now divorced. But he thought he was being poisoned. His dad made him move out and got him an apartment. Richard began tearing apart rabbits that he either caught or bought, and he started eating their intestines raw. Sometimes he would put the intestines and the blood together in a blender, drink this concoction, and he hoped that it would make sure his heart didn't shrink to the point of disappearing from his body. He once injected rabbit blood into his veins and got very sick from it. He believed the rabbit had battery acid in its system, which seeped into his body, but he really just had blood poisoning. He was finally committed as a schizophrenic suffering from somatic delusions. The doctors tried putting him on antipsychotic medications, but none of them worked, and so the conclusion was made that his drug abuse was causing all of these psychotic episodes. In 1976, he escaped the hospital and showed up at his mom's house, but he was taken back to Beverly Manor, which was a facility for mental patients. There, he was nicknamed Dracula. He often spoke about killing rabbits, and one day he was even found with blood around his mouth. 2 dead birds were found outside of his window with their necks broken, and this was classic Renfield syndrome. Richard was eventually released when they no longer thought he was a danger to everyone, or that's what they believed. His parents were granted a conservatorship, which was renewed annually, and his mom paid for his rent and shopped for his groceries. He moved into another apartment and began catching rabbits, dogs, and cats. He would torture them and drink their blood. Sometimes he would even steal neighborhood pets, and there was one instance where a family was missing their dog, and he had their dog, called the family, and told them everything he did to their dog. He also bought guns and began practicing with them. Even though he was on psychiatric medication, he was unsupervised. His mother weaned him from the medications herself and thought he didn't really need them. In 1977, the conservatorship expired and his parents never renewed it, so it left Richard all on his own. One day, his mom heard a loud noise, and when she opened the door, Richard was standing there holding a dead cat. He threw it to the ground, tore it open, and started smearing its blood all over his face and neck. His mother never reported it and never did anything about it. That same year, on August 3rd, police found Richard's vehicle stuck in sand near Pyramid Lake in Nevada. Clothing and 2 rifles were on the seat. Some suspicious things were found, including blood smears all over the vehicle and a blood-filled white plastic bucket containing a liver. They then found Richard through binoculars, and he was naked and he was covered in blood. He ran when he saw them, but they eventually caught up to him and took him back to his pickup truck, and he claimed the blood was his. It had seeped out of him, and it turns out the liver in his truck was from a cow. And soon after, he became a fan of the Hillside Strangler. He read the newspaper articles about the killings and eventually became bolder. 51-year-old Ambrose Griffin was an engineer and a father to 2 boys. December 29, 1977, his wife reported to homicide cops in the ER that he was either yelling or shouting at someone or something. He had just turned and dropped in front of her, and she had heard 2 odd popping sounds, but she didn't really give it any thought. They had just gotten back from a shopping trip, and when Ambrose was going out to the car to get a second load of groceries, he just dropped, and it was presumably from a heart attack. Soon enough, Mrs. Griffin found out that her husband was actually shot in some type of random drive-by attack. One of their sons reported seeing a man walking around their East Sacramento neighborhood with a rifle. They tailed him and called the police, but it turns out he was not their man because his rifle was not the .22 caliber murder weapon. The next day, a news crew found 2 shell casings right outside the Griffin residence. Detectives followed up on the description of an odd car that has been seen driving around, but they couldn't get a clear enough description, so it didn't really lead anywhere. The afternoon after the incident, a 12-year-old boy riding his bike reported being shot at by a man in his mid-20s with brown hair. He was put under hypnosis and recalled a license plate, 219 EEP, but that also led nowhere. Another report was from a woman who lived only a few blocks down from the Griffins, and it was on December 27th when she said a shot had been fired into her home. Her kitchen was searched and a .22 caliber slug was found, and it matched the gun that killed Ambrose. And after that, all leads dried up. January 11th, 1978, Don Larson had a strange encounter. They were neighbors for 6 months, and during that time, Don had seen him carry 3 animals into his apartment against the rules and had never seen them ever again. She thought he was odd, but figured he was probably just lonely. He asked her for a cigarette, and she did give him one, but he wouldn't let her leave until she gave him the rest of the pack. 2 weeks later, on the 23rd, Jean Layton saw a man with long brown hair coming towards her. She watched as he tried the patio door and then the windows, but both of them were locked. Jean met him face to face, and he showed no emotion while he scrutinized her until he turned around and walked back through her yard. Down the street, Robert and Barbara Edwards were bringing in their groceries when they heard a noise. And whoever was inside, whoever the intruder was, ran when they heard them. They heard the window slam and then a disheveled young man coming around the corner towards them. Edwards tries to stop him, but he jumped a fence and lost him. The police arrived to find the house in shambles, and it was obvious that the motive was theft of valuables. He also peed in a clean drawer of baby clothes and on a child's bed. FBI agent Robert Ressler asked Richard how he chose his victims. He said he would go down streets testing doors to find one that is unlocked, and he said, and I quote, "If the door is locked, that means you're not welcome." He found the Wallen's door unlocked. He encountered 22-year-old and pregnant Teresa Wallen, and before entering the house, disposed of a .22 caliber weapon in the mailbox. He opened the door and ran into Teresa as she was taking out the garbage. She dropped the bag as he pointed his pistol at her and shot her twice. One bullet entered her palm, held up defensively, and traveled up her arm to exile her elbow and nick her neck. The other one went through the top part of her skull. She fell, and then Richard bent over her body to point another one and shoot her in the temple. He then drug her to the bedroom, leaving a trail of blood behind. He got a knife from the kitchen and an empty yogurt container from the bag she was carrying. David Wallen got home at 6 and the house was dark. His German Shepherd was waiting, but his wife was nowhere to be found, and I'm honestly really surprised. I was so shocked when I saw that because he loved killing animals, so you would think he'd be like, oh my gosh, 2 in 1, I don't know. Thank goodness he didn't kill the dog, because that made me really sad. It was also weird that the stereo was on. A bag of trash and oil stains led him to the bedroom. His wife lay just inside the door on her back. The position of her body and the clothes all showed signs of sexual assault, and that is where I'm going to stop for those details, because everybody knows what sexual assault looks like and what the clues are, and if you don't, you are far too young to be watching this video, but we're just going to keep it at that. And now this part is really gruesome, so here's another trigger warning before I say it. Her left nipple was cut off, her torso cut open below the sternum, and her spleen and intestines were pulled out. Richard had repeatedly stabbed her in the lungs, the left breast, the diaphragm, her liver. He also cut out her kidneys and severed her pancreas in 2. And then he placed the kidneys back inside her together.
Alright, quick little clip. I don't know how exactly I came across it. I think it was mainly I was just looking up the victims' pictures from what I could. I couldn't find all of them, but then I came across some of the crime scene photos. And the only one that I could actually find was this one that I just described in the video. In a little bit, I put one of the pictures in there that isn't as disturbing. I also found the crime scene photo of Teresa. Let me know if you guys want me to start putting crime scene photos in the videos if there are any. I normally don't look them up, but if you are interested in that, I would definitely be willing to do so. I'm not making an exception for this video because it is I don't have words. It's been a few minutes, so like I'm fine now, but I was shaking at first because of how like disturbing it was. So if you want to see it yourself, you can just look it up. I'm not going to put it in this video because A, it's not appropriate, it's nudity, but also it's just like really, really disturbing, to say the least. So
there was blood in the bathroom, and it was found out that Richard smeared her blood all over his face and his body and licked it off of his fingers. The yogurt container laid next to her that he had collected, and it was covered in blood, and he used it to drink her blood. And then, as it couldn't get any worse, he stuffed animal feces into her mouth. Like, what the heck? And this is where it talked about all the dead puppies and all the puppies he had killed. And I really don't feel like rehashing that, so I'm not going to. On January 27th, 38-year-old Evelyn Myroth was babysitting her 20-month-old nephew in her home 1 mile from the last residence. Her 51-year-old friend, Dan Meredith, came over as well. Evelyn was about to send her 6-year-old son, Jason, to her friend's house, but when he didn't arrive, she sent her daughter to go check. There was movement from the window, but nobody answered the door. Neighbors were worried, so one eventually entered the house. Dan lay in a pool of blood in the hallway. The deputy found a gunshot wound in his head, blood all over the bathroom and in the bathtub. Then Evelyn was found naked on her bed in the bedroom, and there were also signs of sexual assault. She had a gunshot wound to the head, abdomen cut open, and intestines pulled out. 2 carving knives were also nearby, and they were stained red. He stabbed her through the anus into the uterus 6 times, several slices across her neck, and even tried cutting out an eye. On the other side of the bed, they found Jason's body. He was shot twice in the head at close range. Bloody footprints were left behind, and Dan's red station wagon was no longer at the front of the house because it was stolen. David was Evelyn's nephew who she was babysitting, and once his mom arrived, no one had seen David, but a bullet hole was in the pillow that lay inside his crib, and there was lots and lots of blood. It's later found out that Richard drank Evelyn's blood and mutilated the baby's body in the bathroom, and even cut open his head and spilled out some remains of his brain into the tub. As police looked for his body, Richard took him to his own house or apartment and severed his head. He removed several organs and consumed them. Meredith's station wagon was found not too far from the crime scene, keys still inside. And the police were not aware that the vehicle was only 100 yards from Richard's apartment. The FBI were on the case, coming up with a profile. He's a disorganized killer with clues pointing towards possible psychosis, which we already knew that. It was clear that he did not plan these crimes, and he did little to destroy or make sure evidence was not found. He left footprints, fingerprints, and he honestly even probably walked around in broad daylight with blood all over him. It was also thought that Richard did not have a car. The crime scenes were close together, so he most likely walked, and they were pretty close to his apartment as well, and considering he also stole a vehicle. The police also knew that he would keep killing until he was caught. On the same day Robert Edwards chased the intruder away, Nancy Holden also had an odd encounter. She saw a strange man approaching her who seemed to be confused, and she tried avoiding him, but then he spoke to her. He asked her if she was on the motorcycle when Kurt was killed, and this freaked her out. 10 years earlier, she dated a boy named Kurt who was killed on a motorcycle. She then noticed something vaguely familiar about this man, and when she asked who he was, he simply replied with Rick Chase. And this shocked her. She had gone to high school with Rick Chase, and he looked a lot different back then. He looked clean cut, put together, like he had his life going for him. He just didn't look like a hot mess. He was studious, and now he was the complete opposite. She talked with him for a few minutes and she was looking for a way out, and she finally did get that way out when he was paying for something. But then he followed her into the parking lot and begged her for a ride. She got into the car, rolled up the windows, locked the doors, and rode off before he could bang on it or chase after her, I don't know. She then came across the sketch of a disheveled man with an orange ski parka, and she realized that he was wearing that exact outfit and that was the man that they were looking for. They also got a clue from the gun registration of a .22 caliber semi-automatic handgun that was purchased by Richard on December 1977. On January 10th, he had bought ammunition. Then Dawn Larson was watching the news when she recalled her strange neighbor. She had seen a large map of Sacramento on his wall marked with black ink, but she was too afraid to report it because she didn't want to make an enemy. A background check was done on Richard, which showed a history of mental illness, a concealed weapons charge, the escape from a mental hospital, a series of minor drug busts, and his arrest in Nevada. They found his address and went out that Saturday afternoon to check it out. They found out his mother paid his rent and that she thought her son was a victim of LSD abuse. He refused to let his mom inside the apartment. Detectives knocked repeatedly, but Richard did not open the door. They pretended that they were going to leave and then they waited. He eventually emerged with a box in his arms and made his way towards his car. He was wearing an orange parka that had dark stains and his shoes were really bloody. A .22 caliber was taken from him, which also had blood stains on it. They then found Meredith's wallet in his pocket and a pair of latex gloves. In the box he had were blood-stained paper and rags. They took him in and tried to get a confession. He admitted to killing several dogs, but he was stubborn about the other murders. While he was in custody, his apartment was searched, hoping to find clues about the missing baby. Inside smelled awful, and there were so many bloodstains. Like, everything was bloodstained, basically. In the kitchen, they found several small pieces of bone, and in the fridge were containers with body parts in them. One container had human brain tissue. There were also 3 collars, but no animals were found. Photographic overlays on human organs from a science textbook laid on the table, and then there was also a newspaper out that had dog ads that were selling dogs, and it was circled. Evidence was gathered from Richard to compare to other evidence samples that were already being analyzed from the murder victims. Police continued searching for the baby using a bloodhound. They even went to Richard's mom's house, which she did not cooperate, and she said that despite what they found in his apartment, despite any evidence, it doesn't prove that he did what he did. At one point, he admitted to another inmate in the prison he had drank a victim's blood because he had blood poisoning. He needed blood and grew tired of hunting and killing animals, which I guess could also explain why he didn't kill the German Shepherd previously at that one house. Finally, on March 24th, the janitor of the church nearby came across a box with the remains of a male baby. The lead prosecutor for the case of California versus Richard Trenton case was Ronald W. Toxterman, I think that's how you pronounce it, who intended to seek the death penalty. The defense entered a plea of not guilty for reason of insanity, but Ronald wanted to prove that Richard knew the difference between right and wrong, and that he knew what he was doing was wrong and he was not compelled to murder. Part of his strategy included the legends of Dracula. He also read up on how some people believed that drinking other people's blood could possibly heal that person. He wanted to show that even if he believed in this, it was not a viable reason for murder. Given the local notoriety of this case, a change of venue was requested, so they moved it to Santa Clara County, 120 miles away. By the end, a dozen psychiatrists had examined Richard. He even admitted to one of the psychiatrists that he was disturbed by the killings of some of his victims and that he was afraid they were going to come and try to kill him from the dead. There also wasn't any evidence that he was compelled. He kind of just thought the blood was therapeutic. One psychiatrist said he had an antisocial personality disorder rather than schizophrenia. So he was aware of what he'd done and that it was wrong. On January 2nd, 1979, the trial began. Richard was charged with 6 counts of first-degree murder, and the prosecutor made it known, and he was sure to emphasize throughout the entire trial, that Richard had a choice. He knew what he was doing, he knew it was wrong, and he wasn't compelled to do anything, and that he also had rubber gloves at every single victim's house. There were 250 prosecution exhibits altogether. The trial lasted 4 months. The first witness was David Wallen, and 100 more witnesses followed after him. Then Richard took the stand in his own defense, which I feel never really goes right, but he looked awful. He had dropped to 107 pounds, he was lusterless, he had sunken eyes, and he just did not look good. He claimed he had been semi-conscious during the Wallen murder, and then he went into great detail about how he was mistreated in life. He admitted to drinking Wallen's blood, but he couldn't really recall much of the second series of murders, but he did remember what he did to the baby. He claimed he thought the baby was something else, but he did not elaborate. He said he thought his problems came from the inability to have sex with girls, and he apologized for the killings. The defense asked if he could be charged with second-degree murder rather than first-degree murder to spare him the death penalty. This was because he was clearly insane and had not gotten proper help. The prosecutor argued that he was a sexual sadist. After 5 hours of deliberation on May 8, 1978, the jury came back and charged him with 6 counts of first-degree murder. During the sanity phase, after 1 hour of deliberation, the jury found him legally sane. And then after 4 hours of deliberation, the jury thought that the best bet would be for Richard to die in the gas chambers at San Quentin Penitentiary. Killers were being interviewed all over the world to add some more information about criminal psychology to their database. FBI profilers visited Richard to learn more about him. In 1976, Richard believed that his blood was turning to powder and that he needed blood from other creatures to replenish it. However, the psychiatrists released him, even though some of the staff thought he was a danger and protested that he stayed. Richard told FBI profilers that he killed to preserve his own life, and they were making an appeal based off of that. Then he spoke on soap dish poisoning. He explained that everyone has a soap dish. If you lift the soap up and it's dry, you're all good. But if you lift it up and it's gooey, you have the poisoning. And supposedly it's gonna turn your blood to powder. The powder then depletes your energy and eats away at your body. He then said he was Jewish and that he was persecuted by Nazis because he had the Star of David on his forehead. Side note, he was not Jewish, nor did he have the Star of David on his forehead. He explained that the Nazis were connected to UFOs who telepathically told him that he needed to murder people in order to replenish his blood. These UFOs supposedly followed him around and that FBI agents needed to put a tracker on him in order to pinpoint them. Then he shoved his cup of mac and cheese in front of Robert and said he wanted it analyzed for poison. It was also learned that other inmates taunted Richard and urged him to kill himself. Prison mental health professionals thought that it would be best if Richard was transferred to a psychiatric hospital. But he wasn't there very long before returning to San Quentin. In 1980, the day after Christmas, and the 1 day short mark, is that a thing? 1 day short of the 3rd anniversary for the killings, the guard looked in on Richard. He was lying on his back in his bunk, breathing normally. At 11:05, the guard looked into his cell again. Richard was lying on his stomach, his legs dangling off the bed, and his feet were on the floor. His head was against the mattress and his arms extended towards the pillow. When the guard called out to him, he didn't move. He pulled him off the bed, and it was clear to him then that the vampire of Sacramento was dead. The coroner called was K.P. Holmes. He searched the cell and found a strange suicide note talking about taking some pills. He had been taking a daily dose of Cinequan, for his hallucinations and depression. They came to his cell in a package of 3, and he would collect them and then take them all at once so he would overdose. And the cause of death was toxic ingestion. His heart was found to be normal and in good shape despite his lifelong concerns. In 1992, a movie called Unspeakable came out. It was made based on Richard as a model for the killer. His case is still used by FBI as the archetypal, I don't know how to say that, archetypal model, I don't know, for understanding the disorganized killer. So that is this extremely long case. Let me know what you guys think on this case. A lot of it was really gruesome, like all the details, and the website went into even more details. The article I was going off of went into so many more details, and I just didn't feel the need to put them in because that's not really important. I just put the ones that I thought was important for the case to show the crime and how bad it was. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you disliked it, give it a thumbs down. I don't really care. Subscribe if you're new. Comment down below what videos you would like to see next and what you thought on this case. I really want to know your guys' opinion, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!